just, yeah, you will have had the recording in progress. So hopefully, if you're unhappy about being recorded, then you can remove your picture. But hopefully, people will be okay with that. Yes, this is tomorrow is the last day of the Support for Migrant Victims pilot, which was introduced as a kind of to evaluate the position of those whose immigration status was causing, because of no recourse to public funds, meant that they couldn't get the support that other survivors of domestic abuse and violence have been able to, well, in theory, can get. This was an issue that was raised many times in the House of Lords during the passage of the Domestic Abuse Bill. We were unsuccessful, unfortunately, in getting the kind of reforms we wanted to see because of this pilot. We just heard today that at least the money for the pilot is going to continue while it's being evaluated, so that is a big plus. But there are many issues that we need to consider in terms of what the position is for women with no recourse to public funds. So the aim of the meeting today is to provide a space for policymakers, parliamentarians and others to hear about the specific challenges experienced by victims and survivors of domestic abuse and violence with no recourse to public funds, both from first-hand accounts, from policy and professional perspectives, and share our understandings. It's obviously the opportunity to ask questions, and I hope that it will feed into the evaluation of the pilot. Unfortunately, the minister at the very last minute is unable to attend because of pressing business, and we suspect that's because today the government have launched its domestic abuse strategy, and so therefore I suspect she's otherwise engaged on that. But we still have a first-class panel, and I will introduce them now and then bring each in turn. We have we will start with two survivors, and I think it's really important to hear first-hand experience and the expertise that's brought from experience. And the first is Sonia Bazar, who is a survivor of domestic abuse with no recourse to public funds, who has been supported by Southall Black Sisters, done so much work in this area. The second, her testimony will be read out by Elizabeth Jimenez Yanez of the Latin American Women's Rights Service. She's a policy maker. Again, that's done so much work around the issue of survivors of domestic abuse with no recourse to public funds. Then we have Caroline Noakes MP, who's the chair of the Women and Equalities Committee, served as the Minister of State for Immigration between January 2018 and July 2019. And I think, I'm sure people are aware, has used her position to campaign on subjects close to her heart, including issues affecting children, violence against women and girls, and international development. And she was elected Conservative MP for Romsey and Southampton North in 2010. And finally, we will hear from Nicole Jacobs, Domestic Abuse Commissioner, appointed 2019 as a designate, or Domestic Abuse Commissioner for England and Wales. She's dedicated her career to supporting victims and survivors, and has more than 20 years experience as a frontline worker and in domestic abuse policy and intervention. And I think this really shows in the way she has filled the position of Domestic Abuse Commissioner. Certainly during the passage of the Domestic Abuse Bill, enormous support, source of support and help, and throughout he has really pushed this issue of women whose immigration status has put them in a particularly vulnerable situation when it comes to dealing with domestic abuse and violence. So we've had we know this is being recorded, although I think a small bit of the session may not be recorded. Could I remind everyone to stay on mute when they're not speaking, because otherwise we get all sorts of weird noises and interference with the person who is speaking. When it comes to, there is a chat function. Could I ask if people keep the chat function for comments, responses to what's been said, but that we use, when it comes to questions and answers, we use the yellow hand function. And if you look at, those of you who are not familiar with it, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's something called reactions under that. It gives you the function for raising a yellow hand, and then that automatically puts you up at the top of the screen. Otherwise, it's very difficult, I find, chairing the Zoom session to both take account of what's being said, what's happening on the screen, and then also what's questions being asked in chat. So without further ado, I will ask the first survivor of domestic abuse, and very, very much appreciate willingness to share your experiences with us. And that's Soumya Bazar.
Good day, everyone. Am I audible? All right. Thank you for having me here today. As said earlier, my name is Soumya Bazar, and I have children aged 17, 15, and 8 years. I'd like to briefly share my experience of living as a survivor of abuse and violence, subjected to the No Recourse to Public Fund in the UK. I experienced an arranged marriage in India to a British citizen. It was an unhappy one, to say the least. I was made to feel that I was married into being a housemaid and to slave around. I was not allowed to work outside except for the family business. And I was not allowed to have friends, and strongly discouraged from making contact to even my own family. And in continuation of that, I was also verbally abused and belittled at every opportunity and humiliated, more on so abused physically, emotionally, and financially. And thinking about all that still makes me traumatized even after all this time. So when my husband abandoned me abroad, I found myself to be in a destitute situation. I had no resources despite my many years of labor. Due to this behavior, I had no money and also was facing eviction from a family home. My immigration status was up for renewal, and it depended on his job description, his business permit. So this also led me to be in a position where I would face deportation. Now, at this point, my children were taken. I had no recourse, no resource, no support whatsoever, abandoned overseas, my children taken away. And having found myself in that position of struggle for good 3 years, a law firm based in London took up on my matter and applied for legal aid. Now, when I came to the UK on an entry clearance visa, it was to seek reconciliation with my children after good 3 years of separation. And another thing that happened is once I arrived here, I was subjected to the gruesome No Recourse to Public Funds condition for good 10 years. And I waited all that time for the Home Office to make a decision on my case to apply for leave to remain. In that period, I was unable to work, and was reliant on Southall Black Sisters to support me. And they did support me with respect to finding myself accommodation, subsistence, money for food, and money for travel outside London to see my children every weekend. Now, living at risk of destitution for such a long time was daunting and detrimental in itself. And had it not been for Southall Black Sisters helping me and supporting me, my ex-husband would likely have succeeded in continuing abusing me, even in the UK. And had it not been for this, he would have done that and discarded me whenever he felt like it suited him. Now, another thing that happened was the situation where I was waiting for the Home Office to make a decision on my case. It was very distressing for me to live in a limbo for so long, with no certainty about when the Home Office would make a decision on my case, how long I would exist with the support of Southall Black Sisters and with this destitution. I did know for all this time that Southall Black Sisters did not have unlimited funds to support me for indefinite period of time. And that prevented me from being able to get on and rebuild my life after what I'd been through already. So it was as if I was reliving my trauma every single day. And that continued for years, even after facing the abusive marriage and even after the marriage. My ex-husband was able to exploit the situation to his full benefit and continue the abuse because he knew that I was financially independent and not so very much like him. And the situation where I found myself to be in dire straits. So for that reason, I would appreciate some understanding from everybody here to comprehend the height of insecurities that the entire situation landed me up in. Exasperation and desperation taking over, not for one day, not for 2 days, for many years. Now, moving on, I would also like to say that since being granted the leave to remain in the UK, and having access to recourse to public funds, I was able to rebuild my life and rebuild my relationship with my children. I now work for a legal consultancy, and I have also got qualification to work as supporting teaching at schools. And then, like, I do understand time is a constraint here, but I would like to highlight the fact that I am speaking on behalf of a lot of women who are unable to speak due to the stigma and the feeling of being deserted in society, you know, the family disowning them. So there are many issues surrounding not standing up. So a lot of people continue being abused and not stand up for what is right and speak up because they find it frightening, the uncertainty that they would face. They'd rather face the abuse than facing the uncertainty of being exposed or being, you know, highlighted or tipped off by the Home Office. So my motto and my mission out here is to explain the fact that help should be available to everybody, regardless of their legal status in this country. Your immigration status should not be subject to finding help, because if it is not for this, a lot of women will continue facing abuse and violence, and that is not very healthy for society, is it? Thank you very much for listening. I had an agenda. I hope I've covered everything because I may have missed out a few things. I'm really sorry, but it
no, not at all. Thank you, Sophia, and I really appreciate you giving. I mean, as you said, it's kind of re-traumatizing to have to go over that, and so I really appreciate you giving the insight of what it feels like, and particularly the insecurity that you have faced as a result of this application of no recourse to public funds rule. So really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Turn now to Elizabeth Jimenez Llanes, who will read an account from the other survivor who didn't wish, quite understandably, did not wish to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you, Baroness Lister, and thank you, Soumya, for sharing your testimony with us. I also wanted to thank the APPG for organizing this important session. Before just starting to read the testimony, I want to thank Adriana, the woman whose testimony I'm going to read today, for her trust to share her story with me and the opportunity to read it and share it with you today.